The late October air in Mexico City carried the smell of marigolds, copal incense, and street food frying in oil. The entire city seemed caught in a dreamlike haze, preparing for the Day of the Dead. Alejandro had grown up in Coyoacán but had been away for years, working in the United States. This was his first time back since his mother's death. His sister, Camila, picked him up from the airport. She looked tired, her black hair tied back hastily, her voice low. "You came just in time," she said as they navigated the crowded streets. "The neighbors say Mama's spirit won't rest. She visits." Alejandro tried to laugh it off. "Camila, please. It's Dia de los Muertos. Everyone thinks they hear things." Camila's eyes didn't waver. Not everyone hears their name whispered at night. Not everyone finds candles burned down to nothing even when they're fresh. Mama's waiting for her ofrenda, and the house feels wrong. When they reached the family home, Alejandro felt a jolt in his chest. The colonial house on Calle de Higuera looked unchanged, but the windows seemed darker than before, as if the light didn't want to stay inside. They carried in boxes of sugar skulls, papal picado, and photos to set up the altar. Inside, the air was stale. Dust clung to every surface except the table where Camila had already begun arranging offerings. A framed picture of their mother sat in the center. Bowls of mole, pan de muerto, and her favorite tequila were placed with care. But something unsettled Alejandro. Marigold petals on the floor were arranged in the shape of footprints, leading from the doorway toward the altar. "Did you?" he began. "No," Camila whispered. That night, they lit candles and stayed up, telling stories as tradition demanded. Around midnight, Alejandro swore he heard movement upstairs. Wooden boards creaked as if under weight. Camila grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his skin. "She's here," she said. Alejandro forced himself to check. Each step up the stairs felt heavier, like walking through water. He pushed open the door to their mother's old room. The smell hit him first, floral and sweet, just like her perfume. The room was empty, except the mirror across from the bed. In its glass, Alejandro swore he saw her, not as she had been, but as she had looked in her coffin, skin pale, lips stiff, eyes shut tight. The reflection twitched, one eyelid fluttering as though trying to open. Alejandro stumbled back. When he looked again, the mirror showed only himself, pale and shaking. Downstairs, Camila's voice called, strained and urgent, "Alejandro, hurry." When he returned, the candles around the altar had all gone out at once. Smoke curled toward the ceiling. The only flame left was the one in his sister's trembling hand. "Tell me you saw her too," Camila whispered. Alejandro wanted to lie, to keep things rational, but his mouth went dry. The smell of their mother's perfume lingered in the air, unmistakable. "I did," he said. And for the first time since he'd returned, the house felt like it was breathing. The next morning, sunlight pierced the dusty curtains, but the sense of heaviness remained. Alejandro tried to rationalize what he'd seen. Grief, jet lag, suggestion. It could explain hallucinations. But Camila's pale face over breakfast told him she wasn't imagining anything. "I dreamed of Mama last night," she said, stirring her coffee though she hadn't added sugar. She stood at the altar, but her mouth was sewn shut. She pointed to the door. When I tried to follow, I couldn't move. Alejandro swallowed hard. "Dreams are just dreams." "Then why," she whispered, "was there dirt on the floor this morning? Fresh dirt, like from a grave." Alejandro checked. Near the door, smudged footprints of moist earth marked the tiles. He bent down, touched it, rubbed the mud between his fingers. It was real. That day, They walked through the city, trying to distract themselves. Everywhere, the city pulsed with life. Vendors selling papal picado in neon colors, children with painted skull faces running through the plazas, families carrying armfuls of flowers to cemeteries. Yet Alejandro felt detached, as if invisible strings tied him back to the house. By dusk, they returned. More petals had appeared on the floor, scattered in a trail leading to the basement door. Neither had been down there in years. Camila gripped his arm. "We shouldn't follow." But Alejandro, stubborn and logical, forced the door open. The basement smelled of mildew. Their father's old tools lay rusting in the corners. And there, on a dusty chair, sat a small wooden box neither remembered. Inside were personal items: their mother's rosary, her wedding ring, a lock of hair tied with ribbon, all arranged like offerings. At the bottom lay a folded piece of paper. Alejandro opened it. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. "If you love me, do not let me wander. Keep me with you. Feed the altar, or I will never stop knocking." Camila gasped. She wrote this. She knew. That night, neighbors filled the street with music and laughter. The smell of fireworks drifted through open windows. But inside, Alejandro and Camila sat in silence. The candles flickered violently, though no wind blew. Then came the sound, 3 deliberate knocks on the front door. They froze. The knocking came again, slower this time. Alejandro moved to the window, careful not to be seen. On the porch stood a figure, dressed in black lace, her head bowed beneath a mantilla. She did not move except to raise her hand and knock once more. He couldn't see her face. Camila whispered, "Don't open it. Whatever you do, don't." But Alejandro's hand twitched toward the handle. The figure's presence pressed into him like a command, an urge that bypassed reason. He could almost hear her voice, the same lullabies from childhood. When he blinked, the figure was gone. The street outside was empty. They relit the candles, both trembling. And then, from upstairs, came the unmistakable sound of someone walking. Alejandro barely slept. Every hour, the house seemed to stir with unseen movement, the scrape of chairs, the groan of floorboards, whispers too faint to catch. By morning, exhaustion weighed on him like chains. Camila had dark circles under her eyes. "The neighbors avoid us now," she muttered. "They say the house carries a shadow. Even Don Julio crossed himself when I passed him in the street." Alejandro refused to be broken. If Momares' spirit is restless, maybe the cemetery is the answer. "We'll take the ofrenda to her grave tonight, with the others." That evening, they carried food, candles, and flowers through the crowded streets. Entire families were walking the same way, arms heavy with offerings, guitars slung over shoulders. It should have been comforting, but Alejandro felt like prey moving through a celebration. At the cemetery, marigold petals paved the walkways like rivers of gold. Thousands of candles flickered among the headstones. The air pulsed with music, prayers, laughter, weeping. They found their mother's grave easily. Camila knelt, arranging the food and tequila. Alejandro set down the box they had found in the basement. For a moment, the tension seemed to lift. But then Camila stiffened. "Alejandro, look." Between the graves, half hidden by flowers, a figure moved. The same black lace, the mantilla draped over her face. She glided rather than walked, hands folded before her. No one else seemed to notice. Alejandro's heart hammered. "Stay here." He followed. The figure weaved through tombs, always just far enough ahead. He passed musicians strumming guitars, children laughing with sugar skulls in hand, yet none glanced her way. Finally, she stopped near an old mausoleum. Alejandro approached, adrenaline burning. "Mama!" His own voice sounded foreign. The figure tilted her head. Slowly, she lifted the veil. Her face was waxy, grey, lips sewn with black thread, just like in Camila's dream. The eyes opened, cloudy but alive, staring straight into him. Alejandro stumbled back, colliding with a stone cross. When he blinked again, she was gone. Only the veil remained, caught on the mausoleum door. He snatched it and ran back to his sister. Camilla saw the lace in his hands and paled. "You brought it with you? Why would you?" Before he could answer, the candles on their mother's grave extinguished all at once, leaving them in darkness. Around them, the celebration roared on, oblivious. From the shadows between graves came the sound of many footsteps, moving in unison. Alejandro looked up and froze. A procession approached, dozens of figures dressed in black, faces hidden, carrying unlit candles. They moved silently, unlike the joyous families around them, and every single one turned their veiled heads toward Alejandro and Camila. The siblings stood rooted, terror clawing their throats. Camila whispered, "We shouldn't have come." The procession stopped a few feet away. One by one, the figures raised their candles, and every flame on the graves around them died. The siblings fled the cemetery, pushing through the oblivious crowds, hearts hammering. They didn't speak until they were back inside the house, bolting the door behind them. Camila collapsed against the wall. "They saw us, Alejandro. They were watching." Alejandro clutched the black veil, unable to let it go. The fabric felt warm, as though alive. He wanted to burn it, yet some force made him keep it close. That night, the city outside pulsed with fireworks and laughter, but inside, the house lay suffocatingly still. The altar seemed darker, the photograph of their mother almost glaring. Midnight came. The knocks began again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the door. Camila covered her ears. "Don't open it." Alejandro trembled, the veil in his hands. The urge to obey the knocks was unbearable, as though invisible strings pulled his body forward. Each knock vibrated through his bones. Suddenly, the candles on the altar burst into tall flames. The photograph of their mother blackened at the edges. The smell of burning filled the room. Camila screamed, grabbing the photo. "She's angry." Alejandro, without realizing, reached for the door handle. His sister yanked his arm back. "Alejandro, please. It's not her anymore." He turned. The mirror in the hallway reflected not him but the black-veiled figure, standing where he was, hand on the knob. Her sewn lips twitched, as if about to part. The knocks stopped. Instead, from behind the door, came a whisper. Low, raspy, unmistakably their mother's voice. "Let me in." Camila sobbed, shaking her head. "It isn't her. Don't believe it." Alejandro's vision blurred. The veil in his hands began to smoke, threads burning without flame. He dropped it, but it clung to the floor, writhing like something alive. Then came the sound upstairs again, footsteps pacing, dragging. The boards groaned under each heavy step. The siblings huddled together. Alejandro forced himself to speak. "We have to end this." The note, she said not to let her wander. "Maybe if we keep feeding the altar." But before he could finish, the footsteps descended the stairs. Slow, relentless. Camila clutched his hand so tightly her nails drew blood. "She's inside already." The final candle went out. Darkness swallowed them whole. And then, in that darkness, came the last knock. Not at the door this time. It came from the inside of the wall, right behind them,